Let's get started, Larry, with what has happened in the northern part of Israel. These children who have been killed, Israelis are accusing Hezbollah for doing that. And we know these people were citizens of Syria. That's why and Hezbollah says they didn't do that. And
Right.
why they would kill Arab people who are Syrians in the northern part of these are big questions right now. What's your take on what has happened there?
Well, I think Hezbollah would not do it except by accident. And let me explain that a little bit. This is the information I have to this point, and I think it's pretty accurate. The situation, first of all, there's a UN resolution that says Israel in the Golan Heights is illegal, violation of international law. So Israel's not there legally. That said, the most likely explanation is that Hezbollah shot a missile amongst several that were the standard fare now, coming into Israel. And Iron Dome fired a missile at it. And we don't think it deflected the Hezbollah missile. We think the Iron Dome missile deflected. It got the Hezbollah missile, but it deflected. And it's what went into the Golan Heights. Now, Israel's never going to admit that, of course. First of all, it makes Iron Dome look a little less impregnable than it's supposed to be, which has already happened. And second, it just shows you the danger in such a. I keep telling people, look, people, Gaza's not even as big as London, and Israel is not a lot bigger. This is a real difficult place to shoot these missiles around and not hit somebody. And then the second point I would make is the one you were hinting at. These were Arabs. These were Druze. And someone said to me this morning, well, they're citizens of Israel. I said, I don't have that information. They could be. But even if they are citizens of Israel, they're fourth or fifth class citizens, like all Arabs in Israel. So, that's not extenuating circumstances. You don't want to kill children, period. And that brings me to my next point. Hezbollah does not kill children normally. And I don't think they would have done it. And Hezbollah always pretty much lives up to it afterwards, whether it's for propaganda purposes or just the purpose of letting people know what's happened. And they have denied it completely. And I happen to believe them. So who did it? Well, I think this explanation of an accident is probably the best one I've heard. But it doesn't take away from the point that Israel is in the Golan Heights and in the West Bank and in East Jerusalem and in Gaza now, in my view, against international law and is breaking that international law every day that it moves on. And let me hasten to another point here. You no doubt are aware, and perhaps you were going to ask me about the meeting in China. And this was a colossally different kind of meeting. I wrote it, I talked to my Chinese colleagues and I wrote, and not just Chinese in China. And I wrote it down on a kitchen napkin, what they told me. And this is straight from the Chinese mouth, if you will. First of all, their statement was unequivocal. And I agree with this 100%. Neither Europe nor the United States has demonstrated a capacity to forge a deal in Israel-Palestine. Bingo. And one of my Chinese interlocutors said, and we would all, to expound that as long as the United States, increasingly Israel's lawyer and corrupt lawyer, is involved in it, and maybe Europe too, it's never going to produce a deal because both are too favorable to one side, in this case, Israel. So this is a Chinese first point. Second point, Israel has never renounced violence, never recognized Palestinian right to a state. Thank you, Mr. Xi Jinping. Thank you, Mr. Wang Yi, for announcing the truth. And guess what that means? What I've been saying all along, imperfectly, but I say it. A Jewish state in this region of the world cannot exist except through violence. There's no way they can exist without violence periodically taking the forefront. And when that happens, you become a very violent state. And I would conclude right now, on the face of the earth, there is no more state, given its size and power, more violent than the state of Israel. And this is what the Chinese were saying. So that's got to be factored into your considerations. Their third point was today, they said northern Gaza, and I asked about this twice, and a guy said, yeah, they said northern Gaza in the official statement. All of Gaza is what I would say, is a wasteland. That's a good Chinese term. They got it from T.S. Eliot. They went on to say hospitals, schools, universities, grocery stores, 7-Elevens, you name it, all are in ruin. Here's what the Chinese didn't say, but I will say, open parentheses, Ben-Gvir and his boys are ready with everything they need, including sophisticated weapons, shovels, pickaxes, and other things, to go in and do what Netanyahu's ultimate plan is, to do in Gaza what he did in the West Bank, Golan, and East Jerusalem. That's Bibi's plan. Don't know if he's communicated that to anyone other than the real right-wingers like Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, but that's his plan. That's Bibi's plan. It's been his plan all along, to take over Gaza as Israeli land and territory. Back to the Chinese again. Fourth point, China is not playing the role of the United States. China is playing the role of China. We have a powerful economy. We have a powerful diplomatic corps, and we can play a role. We have got 14 groups here, including Hamas and Fatah. And they got everybody there that claims a Palestinian flag. We know the history of these negotiations. We know that 15 minutes after they leave this meeting, half of them will break up and fight amongst themselves. But we are different. We are not the United States. We are not Europe. We do not have the purpose of being one side's lawyer or the other's. We are, if anything, for a resolution to the 70-plus-year-old problem in the Middle East called Palestine, Israel. That's our deal. I think that's a pretty forthright statement. I think it's true in most of its particulars. They've denounced us in terms of our ability and the Europeans to bring a solution to it. And well, they should after 70 plus years of failure. I mean, George W. Bush, when I was working for George W. Bush, pronounced the whole Middle East peace process, the roadmap, all the meetings with Arafat and other things, everything Powell wanted to do, he pronounced it dead and told Ariq Sharon, go do what you need to do. And they're doing what they need to do today, which is killing all the Palestinians they can and taking over their land. So this business with the Chinese intrigues me, because if Wang Yi and Xi Jinping and the other members of the diplomatic corps and elsewhere in China are very serious about this, and we don't throw major impediments in their way, then Blinken can go home and Sullivan can go home and Biden and whoever gets elected can go home, because the Chinese will settle the problem. Now, here's the kicker. Will we ever let them do that? My answer to that is no. So stand by for some real friction between Beijing and Washington over Israel.
How we can overcome these frictions when it comes to Israel and the conflict in Gaza, because at the end of the day, there have to be some sort of understanding, mutual understanding between these two superpowers.
Absolutely, and I would hope whomever is elected in November in this country looks at the situation and says, well, and this is what, interestingly, this is what Colin Powell once said to me, how about let's turn it over to somebody else? At that point, it was the Russians. The Russians wanted to get their nose in there, and for less than altruistic purposes, to be sure. I think the Chinese, who are very far away and don't have a whole lot of interest yet other than economic and financial, I think they're probably being fairly sincere about their not wanting the region to be afire all the time. And the one with the matches is Israel. And so they want to do something about it. But to your question, Powell said to me, you know, it would be interesting if we just let the Russians do it and let them have the pain and the agony. He didn't mean it, of course, and dismissed it 5 minutes later. This is not the Russians, this is the Chinese, and this is a very different group of men, mostly men. I say the same thing, though. I say if the president of the United States is smart, they will say and restrict their staff to this policy. Let the Chinese see what they can do. And let's see what happens. If they fail, we can throw egg all over them and we can scream bloody murder at them. And, we can say, yeah, look what I would hope that we wouldn't do that, but I know us, we would do that. But they might succeed. And if they succeed, then we're looking at what I've said all along, the end of the Jewish state experiment in the Middle East, because the way you succeed is you build a liberal democracy in the Middle East, which Israel's always claiming it is, but isn't. It's a far cry from a liberal democracy. It's apartheid. That's what it is. It's an apartheid state. That's a favorable connotation of it. You could say it's a murderous apartheid state, and that'd be a little more descriptive and accurate. So maybe the ultimate solution the Chinese will arrive upon and compel Israel to accept, and maybe we will go along when we get to that point, is that it can't be a Jewish state. It has to be a genuine liberal democracy. Now, you could say, as the Chinese seem to be saying in this communique and the discussions that went into it, that what they're really looking at is two-state solutions. So that's what they're going to start with. But I think you're probably going to wind up morphing into a single state that is indeed a liberal democracy and that gives its citizens fundamentally the same rights and the same privileges. That means, and this is what the Jews have been so fearful of, and I say Jews purposefully there, because, for example, the people in Nazareth, who are majority Christian and Muslim, I usually play that role when I'm playing the IPC every other Sunday. I usually pick Nazareth to represent the 48,000 people district that's in the center of Nazareth, because it presents you with a whole lot of different problems, since they're mostly Christian and Palestinian and other Arabs in that area. But they get along pretty well. And they're treated fairly well because they're an enclave and they have a lot of power as that enclave. Elsewhere, they're treated really poorly. If you create a state that's treating Palestinians and Arabs in general, and other citizens from the world too who might want to live there, reasonably well, you're going to outnumber the Jews really quickly. Don't even talk about the right to return. You're going to outnumber them really quickly. Even the power of the womb is going to outnumber them. So that would be the end of the experiment of a Zionist Jewish state in the region, which I've said needs to happen. It needs to happen. We need to have a liberal democracy or no state at all. Maybe that's where we're headed. I can pray, I can hope that might be where we're headed. That's the only way, in my view, that Israel, 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 survives. And who knows, might ultimately change the name to Israel/Palestine. Stranger things have happened.
Are we going to have a major war between Hezbollah and Israel after
Netanyahu wants it. Netanyahu wants it. He wants it badly. I think he asked Josh Hawley, Lindsey Graham, and a host of others that question. I was watching Medea Benjamin. If you can find it on YouTube, this is precious. She just sticks that microphone in front of all those congressmen and senators' face and says, "You're supporting baby killers? You're supporting these people?" Well, this one turns around, looks at her, and in his good Southern accent says, "My mother taught me that the Jews are the chosen people, and I'm going to support them for always." And he walks away. And Medea says, and there you have it. He's supporting genocide because his grandmother or mother told him that the Jews are the chosen people. Well, that's what you're dealing with. And that's whom Netanyahu met with, those kind of people. And he asked for one particular thing with regard to the war situation, and that was, I need your help. I need your support, maybe including air power, with regard to Hezbollah when I attack them. And as I hear it, there were no dissenters. The only dissenters were in the White House. The dissenters were in the White House, and they were, of course, the oily Blinken says, "Of course we'll be with you, but we really would prefer not to make it any wider a war than it already is." So that's sort of the official position of the White House. But is it going to be enough? Is it going to be enough? Because Israel knows that once it gets itself in a fix, like it did in 82 and 83, we'll come to the rescue. And that's Netanyahu's plan, I think.
Erdogan said that Turkey can enter Israel just like Karabakh and Libya. There is no reason why we shouldn't do this to Israel. The foreign minister of Israel responding to Erdogan that you're going to have the same destiny as Saddam Hussein had. And he was just linking. It's unbelievable right now what's happening. And there is no reason that we can compare Saddam Hussein to Erdogan. This country is totally different.
Right.
Turkey is totally different. It's a mighty country in terms of their military right now. And they're just talking this way. And it's part of NATO on the other hand.
Right.
On
Well, Erdogan is he's full of rhetoric, and he's full of rhetoric for political purposes, as you and I have talked about before. It resonates with the majority of the Turkish people. I don't, and his two examples, Nagorno-Karabakh and Libya, are not good examples because they really didn't do much there. And they certainly didn't put a force on the ground that was ready to contend with the different factions in Libya or even in Nagorno-Karabakh. So that was really not powerful examples for him to use. Indeed, there aren't any powerful examples. Turkey has been very reticent to use its military forces outside its own borders, except various excursions to eliminate the Kurds, the PKK principally. And they have a pretty good agreement right now. I don't know how ironclad it is, but they do have a pretty good agreement with those very successful Kurds in northern Iraq, which frustrates the hell out of Baghdad. But those very same Kurds are sending oil to Israel. They're about the only reason Israel can continue to do the things it's doing in terms of having oil. So it's a very mixed bag. And if you look at what Turkey has done with regard to trade with Israel, it hasn't fallen off much at all. Whether it's oil or other things, it just hasn't fallen off much. You'd think that'd be the first thing Erdogan would do. But those kinds of things aren't very visible to the Turkish people. They don't pay a lot of attention to that any more than we do in this country. So they don't understand that he's talking out of two sides of his mouth. At the same time, I've said this all along. I think I've said it to you a couple of times. What a position for Turkey to be in with regard to the Islamic world. And Erdogan has always aspired to take the mantle of leadership of the Islamic world away from Iran and away from Riyadh, the two divergent sects that contend for the leadership of the Muslim world, if you will. He wants it. He would have it in a heartbeat if he took decisive action against Israel. And here's another factor. The United States would not lay a finger on him. We would protest up the side of the UN and down again. We would go everywhere we could in the world. Tony Blinken would scream and holler and use his good offices. Wouldn't make any difference because we would not take military action against Erdogan. That's my firm belief. We would be destroying the whole edifice of post-World War II construction that the United States did if we did that. NATO would be gone in a heartbeat, just like that. Done. Toast. Jens Stoltenberg could be looking for a job tomorrow morning. That's how devastating that would be if Turkey did something like that. But it'd be devastating for Israel too. Would they use their nuclear weapon or weapons? I would put nothing past Netanyahu, but I would not contemplate the Knesset or even his war cabinet, such as it is disbanded now. I would not contemplate anybody but Netanyahu being for that. So it would be a fait accompli. And if Erdogan played his cards right, he would just sort of do it and then say, now a two-state solution. And I kind of like the BRICS/Chinese effort at diplomacy. Let's do it. And meanwhile, we'll stay around just to make sure you don't kill any more Palestinians than you already have while we're doing it. I mean, it's something like that. That sounds preposterous, but preposterous things have happened in the past, especially when the world comes to a point like it is right now in both Ukraine and Gaza, with the potential for a much wider and far more destructive war staring us in the face. Sanity prevails suddenly, and you have people who take action and take decisive action. Erdogan could be that person. And after that, to come to my main point, after that, who would be the leader of the Muslim world par excellence? Erdogan. I just fixed your most intractable problem in the Levant. Indeed, I just fixed your most difficult situation in Southwest Asia and the Levant. And I did it through my own good offices and my military. Now, what do you think of that, Riyadh? What do you think of that, Tehran? I'm the boss. And he would be, because he would have taken the thorn out of the Islamic world side.
If Turkey decides to do that, the role of Syria would be a key role.
Yes.
And right now, Bashar
yeah,
al-Assad
Erdogan,
yeah.
No, Erdogan would probably want, so to speak, his flank covered, and would probably make a deal with Assad. You don't come into it unless there's trouble. And then I might ask you to come up to the very border with what you've got left, if you can. I don't know. The situation in Syria is pretty grim right now in terms of Assad's control of his own forces in certain areas. I mean, he's got pretty good control around Damascus, but in other places, he would have trouble doing that. So I might even think of Iraq before I think of Syria, because Iraq is always been the real bugaboo of Israel, more so than Syria. And though it isn't today because of what we've done to it, it still presents the aura of being the most powerful country opposing Israel in the region. And if you got Baghdad to cooperate, and I'm pretty sure Erdogan could get that to happen, you'd have a formidable surrounding of the Israelis, as it were, and they'd be surrounded by some real power.
We thought that Netanyahu, he's gonna talk about Hezbollah in the US Congress, but he was all talk about Iran and let's go after Iran. If you remember last time he decided to go after Hezbollah, the Biden administration said to him, go, you're on yourself. You can do that if you wanted. And right now he's changing toward Iran. Why he's changing? Do you think that he's trying to do his best to bring the United States in?
I think that's always been his ultimate ask. Hezbollah was just sort of like, a fly that he wanted to swat. It's not a fly. It's proven since 2006 it's a pretty formidable force, and it's grown since 2006, both in rocket power, missile power, and in the training and education, if you will, of its ground forces. So it is a formidable enemy. But to Netanyahu, I think it's a fly to be swatted. Different ball game altogether when you start talking about Iran. And I don't doubt for a moment that his flight to Yemen to bomb Hodeidah, the port, was not so much to pay the Houthis back. That was an ancillary purpose. But the main purpose was to demonstrate to Tehran that we have given him over the past 20 years, indeed, we started it in my administration, sufficient tanking aircraft to fly these 2,000-mile legs and return, drop bombs accurately and return, and do it again and again and again. All you got to do is position your tankers strategically, and you can tank the aircraft. Extended range F-15s and others can do that. And they can drop enough ordnance to probably at least look like, as they did with Usrak in Iraq in 1983 or somewhere back there when they bombed the Iraqi nuclear reactor. They can probably make it look like they've devastated Iran's nuclear program. Now, they won't have touch that portion, which is underground. But I wouldn't put it past Mossad to have some pretty pinpoint accuracy on those underground facilities and to conduct a clandestine operation at the same time that seeks to blow up those facilities. So that's what he wants. And if he fails, and I've no doubt now, this is very new in my expectations. I always said he couldn't do it on his own. I've no doubt now that he thinks he can get it started on his own with this tanking capability and the bombs and such. So that would bring us in, because he wouldn't quite do it. And that would make the Iranians very angry and certainly make them, if they haven't already made the decision, make the decision to go nuclear and probably as fast as they possibly can underground. Whether Israel could stop that or not is very questionable. So the United States has to come in because now Iran's going to have a nuclear weapon. Israel started it but couldn't quite finish it. Now, America, you finish it. I'm sure that's possibly, very possibly, Netanyahu's long-term plan.
Yeah, all these 2 years we were talking about the possibility of having a nuclear war in Ukraine. Right now, it seems that Ukraine is just fading away, and just Israel and the situation in Gaza can bring a nuclear war to the region.
I think the potential for a wider and far more dangerous war is more viable in the Middle East than it is in Ukraine.
Because
Both places have the potential, but I think the Middle East it's looming a bit larger than in Ukraine, where the Russians have, for all intents and purposes, won.
Because Israelis have much more leverage on the US
Yes.
Congress and the more than Ukrainians. Ukrainians don't have any sort of leverage that way that Israel has.
Yep. The only leverage they have now remaining is the oligarchical billionaire connections, the Swiss chalets, and lots of corruption, and Americans making much, much money off that corruption and off the arms sales. Those are the only really tangible connections they have anymore. There's no more. I don't think even in Europe of this. Oh, freedom and democracy. Oh, all of these things we say all the time and never mean. Now it's pure cash, cash on the barrelhead. And Ukraine is rapidly becoming negative in that regard rather than positive.
I remember there were a lot of tensions between Israel and Turkey last time. Pakistan was offering Turkey, if you need nukes, we can give you nukes to attack. It's unbelievable, Larry. These decisions are decisions of moments that can happen.
Yes. When we were working the AQ-Con network in the State Department and trying to bring it down, the father of the Pakistani bomb, and we saw all the different countries, some of whom were our treaty allies, who were cooperating with the AQ-Con network for money and selling nuclear components within that network so that Libya, Iran, North Korea, and other countries that we suspected could build a nuclear weapon. We were stunned. I mean, we were pretty dyed in the wool people, been around for a long time, but we were still stunned. For example, German companies that were participating. And that's kind of he was revered. AQ Khan was revered as the father of the Pakistani bomb, and he was protected by Pakistan. It was interesting to see what Gaddafi said about it, because Gaddafi made a cold calculation. If I continue this, they're going to take me out the same way they did Saddam Hussein, they being Britain and the United States principally. And they want to take me out anyway because they want my light sweet crude without any payments. And they also want me to quit dealing with this gold deal in Africa, where we might actually disturb the U.S. financial system because we have so much gold. So he caved in. Look what it got him. This is one day Condi Rice is having lunch with Gaddafi, and the next day, literally almost, we're taking him out, and Hillary Clinton is saying he came, we saw, and he died. Crazy, crazy stuff. We were all of us who'd been involved with stripping Gaddafi. Actually, we just made him do what he thought was wise. All of us who'd been involved with that and then saw this happening to Libya later, just a few years later, we were appalled. But we did all this diplomacy to keep the place quiet and well run and well regulated, and Libyan kids still going to college and school and everything pretty good, as it was in Iraq before we invaded in 1990, 91. Iraq was the most forward country in the Levant other than Israel. Women had rights. They were doctors. They went to university. And so So we messed all this up. Then we messed up Libya, terribly messed up Libya. And we were all sitting back saying, whom are we going to help next? You know, because what we were doing was not helping them. Afghanistan, Syria, we were ruining them. We were making them basket cases. I know from conversations in Colin Powell's office with General Musharraf, I know the Pakistanis know and believe we're the most duplicitous people on the face of the earth. And they're right. Saddam Hussein came to that conclusion. You read some of the archives that we captured in Iraq. At the end of our support for Iran in the Iraq-Iran war, Saddam Hussein was saying some really horrible things about us. I didn't blame him a bit. We were as duplicitous as hell. On the one hand, we're selling him through Donald Rumsfeld precursors for his chemicals that he's using against the Iranians, and then we're just kind of blandly criticizing him at the United Nations for using chemical weapons. And then we're selling TOW missiles and Hawk missiles to the Iranians on the other side. And he had a memorandum he had captured from our CIA, which essentially said our policy was to fuel both sides and keep the war going because it was in our interest to keep them killing each other. And the thing we would say in the Pentagon was they're going to kill each other till there's one Persian and one Arab left on the each side of the Persian Gulf, and then we're going to go issue them dueling pistols. That was the analogy, because that was our policy. So they hated us. Both sides hated us because they saw us as duplicitous, lying sacks of proverbial horse dung. And that's what they said in their communications between their diplomatic staff and others. That's what Saddam Hussein said. That's what the Ayatollah said, especially Khomeini. Who can trust the United States? No one. That's how we are seen in the world today. And I suspect that's how we're seen in Berlin, in Paris, even in London, where the Lickspittles do our bidding all the time. But that's how we're seen, and very shortly, not too far from today, it's going to become widespread to the point where people are going to start talking publicly about it. And that's, you know, that's what I've said. I mean, that's the end of empire. That's the end of empire. This is what happened to Britain. This is what happened to Britain before 56 in the Suez Canal crisis. It's what happened to them after World War I. It's what happened to them after World War II. And people started to talk about the empire. It was not what it looked like. It was weak. It was falling apart. Watch India leave. Watch all the things that are going to happen to the British Empire. And all of a sudden, the empire upon which the sun never set was gone.
Larry, do you see Netanyahu risking the whole world for his position in Israel? Because when you see at the US Congress, everybody's clapping, applauding him. Even he says, don't applaud, just listen to me. It's unbelievable. And the way that he's leading the condition, this conflict in that region, I think it's a full destruction of the region, not just Gaza and Israel, the whole region.
I think you're right, and I think I think the true crime in all this is he doesn't give a damn. He does not give a damn. As long as, first of all, he stays out of jail. Second, he stays in power, and those two things are really the same thing. And third, he gets rid of every Gazan he possibly can, every Palestinian he possibly can. And what you're looking at really is not what he was saying. I got to give him credit for being a dissembler. When he's talking to those people in that video that's now kind of gone viral, where he says, if we weren't doing it, you'd have to be doing it. And the enemy in the region is Iran. The enemy is all the people allied with Iran, from the Houthis to Hamas. That's the enemy, and I'm keeping them from you. I'm fighting them on behalf of you. I'm fighting them. They want to take over the Middle East. What Bibi meant and what he talks about and dreams about is Israel taking over the Middle East. Not the Arabs, Israel. Greater Israel is not just the West Bank, East Jerusalem, Gaza, and Israel proper. Greater Israel is Jordan, Egypt, Iraq, and everything else they can get their hands on. That's what people don't understand about this rampant variety of Zionism. It's not all Zionists. From the beginning with Herzl and all those guys, it wasn't quite this bad, but it evolved to being that bad when they got nuclear weapons and they saw they had Big Daddy on their side and they realized the possibilities. And no one has realized those possibilities to the extent of the very, very, very competent English speaker and Hebrew speaker, Bibi Netanyahu. That's his goal. Greater Israel doesn't just mean, Judea and Samaria and all the old words. It means the entire freaking Levant. I think the Iranians, in their heart of hearts, realize that. I think Iran probably in its heart of heart understands that Israel is the biggest threat to its existence, and not just because of Dimona, but because, which they may decide to counter with their own nuclear weapon, but because of Israel's grandiose dreams of being the power in the Levant, which means taking a lot of territory. They want to be an empire. They want to restore the old image of the Jewish empire, if you will, with David at the helm, whatever, Saul, all those good kings who I don't even know if they existed now that archaeologists are telling us there are probably some very different stories that are being woven by the people in the past.
Larry, just to wrap up this session, in your opinion, can we say that the era of conventional wars is over? Because from what we're witnessing in the Middle East, in Ukraine, in Taiwan, these superpowers cannot fight each other without going nuclear.
I think there's a certain truth to the fact that the conventional war business, if you will, and Lockheed Martin won't like this when I say this, but it's probably passé, or it will be pretty shortly. Maybe the violence and vehemence we're seeing right now in the different conflicts that are going on, and don't let us forget things like Sudan, where thousands are dying every day. But it could be a real killing fields as it goes away. And if, as you indicated, it evolves into great power nuclear confrontation, then it could be the ultimate killing field. So in that sense, that transmogrification, if you will, of war is deadly and dangerous. There is every reason to believe that that is a possible path for it to go down too, with these Putin saying, what was it? The Russian translated it something like mirror measures. In other words, you're going to put ground-launched cruise missiles with nuclear warhead capability. I'm going to do the same thing. We're just doing this and ratcheting up the escalation table, moving up the escalation table with rhetoric right now, and maybe actions to back that rhetoric up. But those actions are very dangerous, and they're moving up that table. So we could be taking conventional war out, as you say, by evolving into nuclear that's civilization ending, or extremely, extremely dangerous, new dark ages, whatever. What comes out of that will probably be, I remember, you probably have heard this before. We used to talk about this a lot. Einstein apparently got it started. Maybe it was Niels Bohr, Einstein, a couple of the others at the beginning of the nuclear age, if you will, who said World War III will be fought with nuclear weapons. World War IV will be fought with sticks. There's some truth to that. If we live through 3, we'll be fighting with sticks.